Okay, so we're good to go, Juliet, with SDG4 in this room. Great. Well, welcome everybody to the breakout room on SDG4 on quality education. If you want to visit the room for SDG14, please click on the link in the chat box. But this is going to be a 35-minute discussion about quality education. My name is Frank Thomas, and I work for ADB, the Asian Development Bank's Strategy, Policy and Partnerships Department. Thank you very much for participating today. As you heard earlier,
thank you.
The discussions today are going to be providing some directions to the 2022 Asia-Pacific SDG Partnership Report, which is going to be about inclusive and resilient recovery from COVID-19. We hope that the discussions today in this breakout room will provide some interesting inputs into specifically educational points and points relating to SDG4 that will help to inform our report next year. Without further ado, I'm very pleased to say that we're being hosted today by Ms. Anna Platanova, Head of Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator Office in Georgia. And I will hand over to Anna now for some initial kickoff remarks. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Frank. Greetings from Tbilisi, dear colleagues. It is my pleasure to co-facilitate this breakout session together with Frank, and to continue our discussion following on some of the initial remarks and findings that we've heard during the plenary on the impact on quality education, progress towards SDG4, and the possible pathways towards an inclusive recovery that leaves no one behind in the field of education. We've heard, and I'm sure many of you have experienced firsthand, how the pandemic has exacerbated both the existing vulnerabilities that different persons face within the education system, and how, in fact, limited or insufficient structural reforms in the field of education also created additional vulnerabilities and exacerbated the impact of the external shock on the delivery of education in many countries in the region. So the challenge is in how to ensure the continuity and quality of learning, including in the conditions of the great digital divide, but also many other dividing lines in our societies and economies, but also how to meet not only cognitive, but also emotional and social needs of the learners, how to protect and enhance the health and well-being and safety of teachers in this period, and also prevent the brain drain from the education sector, and also how to engage the parents and how to work with the very important aspect of home conditions for education, which in fact prevent many learners from progress. Besides that, of course, SDG4 is about education at all levels, and ultimately about opportunities for lifelong learning. So both education for children and youth, and adult learning, which would also be critical for recovery as an enabler for transition between industries, for appropriate school to work transition for the youth, and again, an area where it is the most vulnerable people with least access to quality adult education that are often most in need of these. We have half an hour for our discussion, and we have some guiding questions for you, which are broadly framed around the impact of the pandemic how has COVID-19 affected progress towards SDG4 in your country or in your work? And how have these challenges been mitigated or addressed in the various recovery measures of your government and your institutions? The second round of comments would be around recovery measures, so how they would be different for various vulnerable groups within countries and between countries, and where you see the emerging possibilities, concrete initiatives and priorities to invest in order to enable a more sustainable recovery. And as Frank has mentioned, these ideas would feed into the SDG report 2022. We hope for your active participation and frank and honest sharing of your thoughts and experiences. Now, please raise your hand as if you would like to make a contribution. Feel free to also use the chat box to provide any additional comments that you wish. I would suggest that we first look at any comments related to the impact and the place of education and addressing the negative impact on education in the current recovery measures. So please, dear colleagues, the floor is yours.
Maybe I will start adding a couple of thoughts and my observations. Over the past 2 years, I was dealing with a lot of issues and challenges related to impact of COVID on educational sector. And I could see like 3 major areas where we could see huge changes. However, those changes could be actually, of course, they have some negative aspects, but they can be used in order to use momentum to make also some positive changes. Number 1 is digital transition. When we talk about digital transition, we talk about, of course, negative impact. One aspect is digital divide within the societies and between the countries. However, at the same time, digital transition could improve quality of education. At the same time, it can improve like collaboration between different countries. If we talk about using similar apps, similar platforms, or similar approach to digital transition. Number 2, labor market changes. Labor market was changing even before COVID. We have to admit it. So a lot of look at any a lot of publications about labor market, research studies about labor market, popular publications about labor market. We're talking about some professions. Sometimes there is 30 professions, 40 professions, 100 professions will disappear or disappearing right now, or will disappear within the next 10 years. And the COVID contributed to the particular shift in labor market. But at the same time, we could see that economies in many parts of North and Central Asia are creating new jobs. And we need to make sure that we are ready for this particular fundamental shift in the labor market. And we are ready to use new tools in the field of education as changing approach to and introducing maybe new skills and competences into education at all levels. Make sure we are ready to deal with the fundamental shifts in labor market. And number 3, I usually talk about curricular development. I could notice that some countries, some colleges, universities, individual schools are more successful when they are flexible. They are flexible, they show flexibility in introducing like online learning where they have no face-to-face opportunity for face-to-face education. They introduce digital platforms, digital tools when they have COVID-19 related closures. So, and curricula is when those schools, colleges, universities, those who were flexible in developing curricula and revising curriculum, So they were more successful, and you could see graduates from those schools, college, universities, currently actually dealing better in labor market, current labor market compared to those who actually were behind or late in making this particular this flexibility and these changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I would ask you to kindly mute your microphones if you are not speaking. Also, it's quite difficult to see who is raising a hand. So would be great if you could indicate your willingness to speak in the chat box. Would anyone like to take the floor?
Please do feel free to introduce yourself, your name and your organization as well when you give your remarks, in case you would like to have some discussions after this session on your comments and your feedback. Thank you. I think we have a comment from Ting Ting from ESCAP in Bangkok.
Ting Ting, yes, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, yes, this is Ting Ting from ESCAP. I work on social developments. I just like to follow on what Dr. Abazov has mentioned about how to also improve quality education with the perspective of the labor market changes. In ESCAP, we are recently working on a report to look at employment of persons with disabilities. At the same time, we have been observing some additional challenges for vulnerable groups such as persons with disabilities, in terms of adapting their skills and trainings to in response to the changes in the labor markets because of COVID-19. For example, the increase in using distance working, teleworking tools, and adapting to new forms of job and employment. So I think across the region, it would be also very important to consider these aspects in terms of how to adapt the learning and vocational education, etc., for groups of particular vulnerabilities. That's just an additional comment from my end. Thank you.
Ting Ting, thank you. Would you be able to provide some concrete examples to that end of perhaps any interesting practices that you came across?
Well, we don't have a lot of quality data from across the region, and the report hasn't been published. But I could possibly share that there have been anecdotal evidence from countries where informal sector is the key foundation of the economy, and also this is the sector where persons with disabilities have the most opportunity to get jobs and wages. So because of these contexts, the impacts of COVID-19 in the labor market has intersectional challenges for persons with disabilities, for example. An example is that there are a lot of persons with disabilities who are engaged in producing dispatch works or processing documents for bigger companies or work processing, etc., which now have to work remotely. But without a good digital connectivity and the skills necessary, they are at high risk of losing their original jobs and income. So that is the kind of situation we are looking further into in the reports where I just mentioned, but it hasn't been published. So more evidence and discussions would be disclosed later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps some additional comments on the digital divide, and we've heard already some comments in relation to the use of digital opportunities in education. But very importantly, digital divide means that many schools and many learners in our region simply do not have access to online learning opportunities. In Georgia in particular, this meant that remote learning had also been provided on TV, for example. This is a huge gap in education for a lot of learners, and something that is still only marginally being addressed, as here, for example, students only were able to come back to schools yesterday. So I'm really curious about how these very different challenges have been addressed in your countries, and whether there are any interesting practices that that we could reflect upon together. Please, would anyone else like to take the floor?
Perhaps a question for, is someone about to make a comment? If not, perhaps a question for Dr. Abazov on his remarks relating to digitalization. So certainly, I think that's a very interesting point, that where there have been many negative impacts of the pandemic, those impacts also lead to opportunities. And you've given a very sort of tangible example of digital transformation, which can lead to enhanced skills and sort of facilitate entry to the labor market, etc. My question would be, do you think North and Central Asian countries, which is obviously the area covered by this forum today, are particularly relevant for this point relating to digitalization, digital transformation? Would you say they've made some significant advances in this area over the past 18 months? Or are they indeed lagging behind, do you think, compared to other sub-regions of Asia? Do you have any comments on that aspect?
You know, I followed some debates in academia among the scholars, those who studied educational transformation, including digital transformation in field of education in North and Central Asia. And I remember there were a lot of negative, actually, remarks about digital transformation, because they said quality education could be delivered only during in-class learning and in-class learning. A lot of people actually followed old schools. However, COVID actually made, like, it was game changer. A lot of scholars, actually practitioners, educators, teachers actually accepted the reality that they need to change their attitudes towards digital education and learn how to use them better, in a better ways. So, for example, one of the challenges, like in the early 2020 was, okay, we got equipment. We provided equipment to Tibet colleges in my area. We provided equipment to universities around our areas. However, we suddenly realized that many teachers cannot use them simply. They don't have skills and competences to use technologies, number one, to adapt their curricula for delivering over internet or online education. And number three, they have no experience in doing it. So in this like context, COVID had actually, we could see that had one impact that I would not use word forced, but encouraged many teachers, educators, scholars to learn how to use new technologies, especially digital and technologies in educational process. So in this case, we could see digital transformation started in North and Central Asia a bit later, way behind Southeast and Southeast Asia is behind East Asia, and this is like a reality. The North and Central Asia quite behind those regions. However, right now they have opportunity to catch up because they got many schools, many Tibet colleges, many universities got equipment, and over past 18 months, a lot of teachers, many teachers, many educators got training. Therefore, I believe within the next 20 months, they will be ready to move forward in digital transition. Also, they probably will stay behind, for example, East Asia.
Thank you very much. I would like to now give the floor to Zakira Begalieva. Please, the floor is yours.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники. Очень интересное выступление. Я бы хотела немножко рассказать о своем опыте по тому, как мы внедряли дистанционное образование, профориентационную программу для лиц с инвалидностью. Мы понимаем, что лица с инвалидностью именно в сфере качественного образования остаются за бортом, да? И в период ковида здесь вот их положение еще хуже усугубилось в силу различных причин. Это отсутствие интернета, отсутствие тех же гаджетов, ноутбуков и так далее, чтобы достаточно квалифицированно получать те или иные знания. Наш фонд iTeachMe, Центр развития компетенций, занимается уже более 3 лет предоставлением новых профессий в диджитал-сфере, краткосрочные профессиональные курсы. Все наши курсы онлайн, программа 2 месяца, 2,5 месяца. Они адаптированы под особенности лиц с инвалидностью. То есть есть у нас жестовый язык на каждом уроке, субтитры, также учтены возможности для людей с низким зрением. И еще у нас есть курсы на казахском языках, потому что большая часть центральноазиатского региона общается на русском языке, казахоязычного контента, как так оказалось, именно в современных профессиях не было. Поэтому вот наши курсы адаптированы под разные категории лиц с инвалидностью. С гордостью могу сказать, что 87% наших выпускников трудоустроены или получили первую зарплату. То есть именно онлайн, именно дистанционное обучение, если учитывать разные особенности и создавать равные возможности, то является наиболее подходящим моментом обеспечения инклюзивного образования. Вот в целом хотела рассказать об этом.
Большое спасибо, Закира, за рассказ о вашем опыте. Colleagues, if you see, we also have some comments in the chat. We've had comments from Khurshid Nurov in FAO Uzbekistan on how the pandemic impacted education system in this country. Khurshid, you write at the end that this experience will likely be taken into account in the preparation of appropriate training programs. Do you have any further knowledge on this? How exactly will the COVID experience be reflected in the new generation of curriculum development?
Hello, colleagues. Hello, Anna. It's nice to see you all here. My mic, I have some problems with mic. Anyway, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you well. Go on.
Oh, thank you. Yes, this solution could be in my observations shows that solution could be in the programs which are adopted in our country. We have a lot of programs on education, also on internet improvement. I mean, the technical improvement and many other things are already adopted in legislative level, on government level, and hopefully it will. The pandemic is some kind of unexpected issue. We already had this issue with internet. We had certain issues with education in our country, but the pandemic, I mean, maybe tripled, maybe more than tripled, is exacerbated this problem in our country. And so why I wrote this comment is because I can see here some representative from ADB and other donor organizations. You can see here Frank Thomas, and these things should be, I think, should be taken into account when they will elaborate some plan some projects or programs to finance our education system, because nowadays you cannot take just one sphere, saying only education, but also it concerns the internet services, also some social aspects, and many other things. And so in remote places especially, it's very difficult. In Tashkent, I wrote, this is in Tashkent, it happened in Tashkent, in other large cities in Uzbekistan. I cannot imagine the situation in our rural areas. So that was my comment, and thank you for attention. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much for your additional insights. Do we have any other colleagues who would like to take the floor?
Perhaps I could just ask our ESCAP colleagues to show us the polling question. We have an interesting polling question, I believe, which we'd like to ask the audience, where everyone can vote relating to SDG4 education. Do we have an ESCAP IT colleague who can put the polling question on screen, please? There we go. So quality education has been included in COVID-19 recovery measures in my country. So from your perspective, from your country or your institution, to what extent do you agree with this statement? That in the recovery measures of your government, of your country, education, SDG4 has been integrated and included. Please, please choose your answer. And then I think after a few seconds, we'll get the results. Do we have the results, ESCAP, please?
The participants are still voting. Currently, we have 20 out.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we can go to the comment. I think someone raised their hand. I can't remember who it was. The hand is gone, but there was a hand raised just now. Was it Jian, I believe?
Yes, you are right. Я бы хотела, если возможно, по-русски. Представляю Армянский государственный педагогический университет. И в нашей стране, как и во всех странах постковидского периода, некоторые проблемы образования, которые, как везде, мы перешли на дистанционное образование, но тут же, будучи социальным работником, тут же выявились ряд проблем, которые, видимо, государство не было готово к этому. Речь идет о необеспеченных группах населения, для которых использование дистанционного образования стало проблематично. Приведу очень простой пример. Семьи, даже в столице, где вроде проблемы интернета не существует, однако подсоединение к интернету – это лишние затраты для семьи. Семья не обеспечена, количество, если семья многодетная, это количество гаджетов, которые необходимы для проведения занятий в одно и то же время для детей в разных комнатах. У нас есть семьи, которые в очень тяжелом материальном положении. Как и везде, я думаю, мы не исключение. Пути преодоления были найдены в совместной деятельности с NGO, Non-Governmental Organization, которые максимально содействовали этим семьям. Однако проблема таким образом качественно не решается. То есть все равно возникает там или здесь проблемы. И вопрос о качестве образования очень беспокоит. Ведь я представитель Армянского педагогического университета, там тоже преподаю, и я видела, что у нас была система дистанционного образования. Нам всего лишь надо было перейти от офлайновской системы к онлайновской. Но даже в этом случае у нас было множество студентов, для которых материалы, которые представляются, были недосягаемы. По причине элементарной доступности и недоступности интернета. Как финансово, так и физически. Студенты, у которых нет материальных возможностей оплачивать интернет на постоянной основе. И здесь есть еще одна большая проблема, на которую я бы хотела обратить внимание. Это роль взаимоотношений студента и преподавателя в офлайновском режиме. То есть пример преподавателя, тьютера как такового, дистанционное образование, оно уводит. В результате формализм увеличивается в разы, а формализм он приводит к формальному мышлению, к стереотипному мышлению, и творческий потенциал, боюсь, что мы начинаем терять. Спасибо большое за внимание.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our shorter breakout session. We have also taken note on additional comments from Dmitry and Aygul in the chat box. Thank you very much for those. And we will do our best to reflect the summary of these discussions in the plenary. Thank you all, and see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was very interesting.
So those of you who would like to do SDG 5 next, please stay here. Those of you who want to do SDG 15, please click on the link in the chat. And we will start in 1 minute with SDG 5 in this room. Otherwise, please go to the other room, click to the link.
Talia, will we be starting the discussion now on SDG 5?
Yes, go ahead, Aina.
Okay, great. So thanks everyone for joining this discussion, looking in more depth at the ways in which SDG 5 has been affected by COVID-19 and how SDG 5 can be put at the center of efforts to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic as well. I'm Smita Nakuda. You heard from me once already. I'm with the Asian Development Bank, where I serve as their focal point on the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm very lucky to be joined by Aina Setiava. I'm very sorry, I probably pronounced your last name wrong, Aina, from the United Nations Population Fund.
Thank you, Smita. the esteemed participants of the breakout group on it.
Is this better?
Can you hear me? Smita, please go ahead. Can you
hear us clearly now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm very honored to be joined by my colleague Aina from the United Nations Population Fund, who will be co-hosting this discussion with me. And we're really looking forward to hearing your experiences and perspectives on this topic of the effects of COVID-19 on gender equality and ways in which we can use recovery to promote gender equality. So perhaps I can turn first to Aina for a few opening reflections to kick off the discussion, and we look forward to hearing from all of you on these three guiding questions.
Thank you, Smita. Can you hear me, just to get the confirmation from your side?
I hear you very well.
Yeah. So good afternoon, dear participants of the breakout group on SDG 5 on gender equality. And it's my honor to be one of the co-moderators of this breakout group. And thank you for showing the interest in SDG 5. I can see that we have more than 70 participants who joined the breakout group, and I'm very excited to moderate specifically the SDG 5 group and discuss with you, based on your experiences and expert knowledge in your respective countries and organizations, the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, which we already discussed, reversed the progress that has been made on gender equality and women's rights in the countries of the North and Central Asian sub-region. Just taking the opportunity that I have the role of the co-moderator, let me briefly relate the work of the United Nations Population Fund and how we relate to achieving SDG 5. So UNFPA is a specialized reproductive health agency, and our global mission is to support the governments to achieve 3 transformational results that directly contribute to the achievement of the SDG on gender equality. And maybe it will help to facilitate our further discussion today. So there are 3, we call them 3 zeros. First is ending unmet need for family planning, which is central to women's empowerment and sustainable development. Second result is on ending preventable maternal death. And still, just for your information, some 830 women and adolescent girls die each day from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth. Third result is on ending gender-based violence and harmful practices. So as the struggle for gender equality continues, violence against women and girls remain a global pandemic in itself. So 1 in 3 women globally will experience physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. So as a UNFPA representative, importance of SDG 5 is in core of our organizational culture. Just a little bit of to stimulate the discussion today, pre-COVID era, there has been already progress over the last decade in nearing to SDG 5 and in all its targets. We all know that more girls are going to school, fewer girls are forced into early marriages, and more women are serving in parliament and in positions of leaderships. Laws are being reformed to advance gender equality. This is particularly true for our sub-region. Despite these gains, many challenges remain, and the COVID-19 pandemic has made a profound shock to our societies and economies, and women are at the heart of care and response efforts. So we shall all acknowledge that coronavirus outbreak has and continues to exacerbate existing inequalities for women and girls across every sphere, from health to economy, to security and social protection. And as the 5th North and Central Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on SDG calls for building back better from COVID-19, while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. And this full implementation is not possible without the tangible progress and acceleration on SDG Goal 5. And since early 2020, with the spread of COVID-19 pandemic, even the gains for SDG 5 made in the past decades are at risk of being rolled back. And as I mentioned, the pandemic is deepening pre-existing inequalities, exposing vulnerabilities in social, political, and economic systems, and impacts across all other sustainable development goals. So all 9 targets under SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment and other respective SDGs may be relevant to address many of our sub-regions' challenges brought by the global pandemic. I just will mention a few of them. So women play a disproportionate role in responding to the virus, including as frontline health workers and carers at home. And women's unpaid care work has increased significantly as a result of school closures and increased need for older persons. And this was well mentioned by our expert on gender, Ms. Mustafina, in her excellent presentation about women's entrepreneurship in Kazakhstan. So we could also discuss the economic impacts, which are felt especially by women and girls, because generally they earn less and they save less. So nearly 60% of women working in the informal economy, which put them at the greater risk of falling into poverty. So also we could discuss today that health systems and how they affected gender inequality. So in countries with weak health system, pregnant women and new mothers, newborns are now in an even greater danger. So, and also importantly, the pandemic has also led to a steep increase in violence against women and girls. With all the lockdown measures that we have seen the increase in gender-based violence. So women's well-being has suffered during COVID-19 outbreak, with incidents of domestic violence, which is increased by 30% in some countries of our sub-region. And also very importantly, we could also discuss the issue of data across SDG 5 and other related SDGs, because we all know that to address vulnerabilities and inequalities, we should know where we have to focus our attention. So as such, the objective of today's breakout discussion, as mentioned by Smita, we will share our reflections and insights on how we can prevent the reversal of progress made on gender equality. So please feel free to introduce yourself, your organization, background, and country, and share the impact of the coronavirus on gender equality and what examples you could actually bring, because as I understand, these examples will feed into the 2022 SDG partnership report, and it will be a great opportunity for visibility and knowledge sharing for the countries of our sub-region. So we could start our discussion, colleagues. So raise your hands or put your comments into chat box, but please introduce yourself because it's difficult to see who is speaking. And you can use whatever language is comfortable with you, be it English or Russian. So we have just completed the discussion in SDG 4. And a lot of interesting examples were brought in by participants. And I think we all agree that gender equality and education sectors are very much related. So maybe this could be also one point of our discussion today.
Also seeing amongst our participants a huge diversity of expertise and organizational representation. So I just from looking at your titles, it looks like we have ministries of finance as well as some representatives of national statistics offices participating in our group right now, and it would be great to hear any reflections that they have from their perspectives also on the variegated effects on women, opportunities to strengthen data collection related to women's needs, those sorts of issues.
Mm-hmm. And you can see guiding questions on your screen, which can facilitate the discussion, but it's indeed very important to share your country examples and how you could actually address those issues related to SDG 5 and across all SDGs, in fact, because gender is a cross-cutting issue. So colleagues, please feel free to come up and just speak up. We have Tintin from ESCAP. Please, Tintin.
Hi, colleagues. Good afternoon, good morning. This is Tintin from ESCAP. As we're waiting for other participants from the countries and governments to provide their more interesting comments, I'd like to reflect a bit on towards the third question in terms of priorities for future investment or collaboration. In fact, I have put my comments in the chat box, but just to very briefly repeat it here again, that in ESCAP, we are looking very specifically into the unpaid care burden disproportionate on women over the pandemic. And the fact that unpaid care or care burden has increased for women, especially during the pandemic, has a lot to do with, of course, the fundamental underlying gender inequality and gender labor division. But the pandemic has intensified the unequal division of labor in that regard. And of course, it also has, we have heard from the earlier speaker, it has a lot to do, it has a negative impact on how soon and how well women can return to the economy, economic participation and the labor market. So because of these contexts, it will be very important for the reports and for the partnership to reflect upon how to address the issue of unpaid care. And in fact, from the North and Central Asia sub-region, there are very interesting evidence in terms of what care-sensitive policy measures have adopted by countries in the region. The largest number of care poverty policy measures adopted in the region are from North and Central Asian countries. And a large proportion of these policies are targeting women or trying to address women's differential needs. So I just thought going forward, it would be very important and very interesting to see data and good practices from the North and Central Asia region on, for example, what's the effects and impact of these policy measures already adopted. So that we have evidence and lessons learned to inform further investment in care economy going forward. So it will be very interesting to hear from colleagues from countries in the North and Central Asia region in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Tintin, for starting the discussion about this important topic on unpaid care, and that our sub-region actually has advanced in introducing some policy measures. So there is an invitation, please, colleagues, if you had those policies and measures introduced as a part of your recovery plans, please share. It would be nice to hear your country examples. I don't see any hands, unfortunately. But maybe I could briefly share the example what UN country team came up in Turkmenistan under the leadership of UNDP and UNRC. There was a development of the joint government and UN socioeconomic response plan, actually, which identified some key vulnerable groups in the population, and women were actually prioritized in this planning, and it helped us to stimulate the discussion across all sectors. And as UNFPA, for example, we also supported the government in the development of the National Action Plan on Gender Equality, and it integrates some of the critical measures related to the COVID and pandemic response in general into this plan. So it's one of the examples that was used from Turkmenistan. So colleagues, I know that we have representatives of all 9 countries here. So it would be nice what actually you are doing in Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. So colleagues, please, it's indeed important to report back to the plenary with the strong examples that were implemented at the ground. Maybe we could also hear about data collection mechanism that were introduced when the pandemic hit. Do we have any participants who would like to share the example? So as we discussed, colleagues, it's not only SDG 5, which is now in the focus, because we all know that gender equality, it cuts across all key SDGs. For example, we could speak about SDG 1, that we shall recognize the need for special support for women by government in the face of the pandemic, and talk about social protection mechanism introduced for women, girls, and families in need of the which are already on the economic margins. It's also SDG 3 on health. It's SDG 4 on education. It's SDG 17, which is all about the partnership and data collection. So colleagues, please feel free to share.
If I may add, because this particular area of great concern in the field of education. From our experience, we could see that, can you hear me? That the women, especially from remote rural areas in many parts of Central and North Asia, actually need more attention, more investments, and more training in using modern digital technologies, online learning, for improving their skills and competences and improving their competitiveness in the labor market. I would like to highlight this a very important area for intervention at the current stage and probably in future. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you please introduce yourself, because I cannot see who is speaking and what country experience.
My name is Rafiz Abazov, Honorary Director of Ban Ki-moon Institute for Sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Almazov. And indeed, this is a very important discussion because to contain the spread of the virus, many countries in the sub-region have temporarily closed educational institutions nationwide and locally. And as was mentioned by Mr. Almazov, many girls from disadvantaged households cannot participate in these remote learning opportunities because both their homes and their schools lack the required tools, sometimes skills and technologies. And this also brings us back to widen the gap of inequalities in accessing the remote learning at the time of the pandemic. And we have one example. I see a comment from Maria Rotkina from Azerbaijan. Who says, I will comment about government support to women entrepreneurs. Please, Maria, if you could speak up and share, but you are saying you cannot join by voice. I understand you are typing in into the chat box. Please do. And we have a comment from Khurshid. Khurshid, I cannot see the last name fully, but he said that possible reasons for the increase in domestic violence and resentment during the pandemic are temporary unemployment or lack of earnings, as well as modern lifestyles, urbanization, where people living together as husband and wife have less time to promise and learn about each other. The pandemic created an artificial barrier to leaving the house for the whole day and created a situation in which married couples being at home were forced to communicate with each other and learn about their partner new and previously unknown aspects. They began to discover something new and unusual, and at times they didn't even recognize each other. Like, I didn't know you were like this or that. Thank you, Khurshid, for sharing this example. If you could share any lessons learned in terms of how this was integrated at the policy or some service level to respond to the needs of women facing domestic violence, that would be highly appreciated. I can see that you are from FAO. Please, Khurshid.
Aina, right? Aina, thank you. Yes, pandemic really exacerbated this situation among the couples, among the family members. It's not about only wife and husband, and also about other family members. So it's just one example. And unfortunately, it's irreversible process. Urbanization is irreversible process and very difficult to socialize, to make it more less profitable, less business style, and less routine. And in the morning we get up and go to work and come back thinking about it and thinking about how to make this our life prosperous. But actually it has another negative side impact. And I would propose in this, I would propose to shift to 4 working days week, not 5 or 6, and so to give the people, we are human beings, we came from nature and we need to talk about each other. We read a lot of books from the childhood where we are full of impressions, full of various kind of experiences. Why not to share with each other? Why not to share with our loved ones and to travel with them? So I think the UN should think about how to make it more sociable, how to make it more humane, this urbanization with very rigid situation, and make it for people to make it more, to create more lively, favorable livelihood in this planet. And to, I think one is the way is how to make it is just to cut the, to decrease this working days to 4 working days, 8 hours per day. That's, I think, would be time for parents and for couples to talk to each other and devote their times to each other. Thank you very much. Over to you, Aina.
Thank you, Khurshid, for these insights. I would agree with you that we all need to think about responsive policies when it comes to flexible and family support regulations, because this is something new brought in by COVID pandemic, when it's very challenging, especially those teleworking, to find the work-life balance. And there is a general agreement that we started working more than pre-COVID era. And partially, yes, this also can contribute to the tension in the family and increased domestic violence globally. And I have some few comments from colleagues. Maria, she shared experience of OHCHR projects in Azerbaijan. So provision online psychological assistance to women, children, and older persons by child and family support centers, and launch of online psychological assistance project, which has already benefited more than 2,000 people. On December 2021, a new hotline on gender-based violence was opened in Azerbaijan, and the hotline number for victims of gender-based violence, especially women and girls who have experienced violence. Very good example, and provision of hotline services is something that governments have to think about, especially in responding to the domestic violence. So she said that those who contact the hotline can receive information on gender, domestic violence, and appropriate support services. Hotline was opened in cooperation with the State Committee on Family, Women and Children's Issue and United Nations Population Fund. Maria, thank you a lot for this example. And we in Turkmenistan, as a part of the joint UN and government SDG4 joint program, has also introduced specialized services, including hotline service for women who are at risk of gender-based violence as a part of the joint initiatives. And we have a comment from Aygul Kamalova. She said that, так как я представляю образование, могу сказать об инициативе Министерства здравоохранения, я понимаю, да, Кыргызстана, в частности, достижение ЦУРФА-5. Министерство образования и науки Кыргызской Республики разработало положение о порядке проведения антидискриминационной гендерной экспертизы учебно-методических комплексов. Спасибо большое, Айгуль, за ваш опыт. И на самом деле, я так понимаю, что эта инициатива была именно разработана в рамках как бы recovery plans по ковиду. We have a further comment from Maria that the Cabinet of Ministers of Azerbaijan approved the rules of state guaranteeing and subsidizing interest of loans to entrepreneurs. According to the rules, guarantees and subsidies are issued to entrepreneurs operating in the areas affected by COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Thank you, Maria, for this another example. And I also want to mention about experience of Dildora. I cannot see the full last name, unfortunately. Пандемия оказала сильное влияние на малый бизнес, где в основном трудятся женщины. Многие женщины лишились дохода по причине того, что владельцы бизнеса стали получать меньшую прибыль, стали сокращать рабочие места. Преференции правительства смягчили ситуацию, но в целом малый бизнес до сих пор чувствует последствия пандемии, пострадали больше женщин малых городов. Спасибо, Дильдора, за ваш опыт. И на самом деле мы уже в течение сегодняшнего дня обсуждали этот вопрос, что женщины, особенно те, которые управляют малым бизнесом, пострадали из-за глобальной пандемии. I can see that Natalia is saying that we can wrap up because the time is up. So thank you, colleagues, for sharing those interesting examples. And if you could also submit your voices as a part of polls for SDG 5, this would be appreciated. Thank you. And I will see you back at the plenary.
Dear participants, so please just stay put. The plenary will take place here, so you don't need to go anywhere. We just wait for the other breakout group to rejoin us again. Smita, Aina, thank you so very much for leading the breakout. I think people were a little bit maybe shell-shocked. I don't know, we were a big group, so we were slow to start. And just now when people started giving comments, the time was over. So that was a little bit unfortunate. Next time, we'll try to warm up people somehow better, or maybe people can add comments quicker. But we have some nice comments in writing, so thanks very much. And yeah, everybody, please stay here. We want to hear the wrap-ups from the 4 breakout groups. So we will start again with Juliet just in a moment.